It says we're live. I hope we're live. Oh, yes, we are. Sorry, that was terrible. I was just feedback on the other thing. Right, I can see us. Good. Well, good evening and welcome to We Need to Talk About Sunday, episode 36. I wonder if anyone has watched all 36. Probably not and survived. There we go. I'm joined this evening by Dr. John Evans, who led our service on Sunday on the theme of bread for each day. So welcome, John, and thanks for agreeing to well, it's not the first time you've done this, but thank you for agreeing to come back. It's great to have you with us to talk more about bread. And as with everyone we've had on so far, I'm going to ask you the question that we've been asking everyone. What is your favourite type of bread?
I quite like the bread I make, so it's very simple bread. I play about with mixes of the flour. Presently, it's a mixture of a normal bread white flour, but also lemon and ginger's flour, which is a little coarser than the standard one. And so our white bread always comes up slightly brown, but I'm sure there's some goodness in the extra brown. But I did buy tiger bread today, which it's got its own charm too.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I love a bit of tiger bread. Oh, I keep forgetting. So every time I ask this question, someone's like, oh, I forget that bread exists until someone says it. But I've grabbed it from the slides. This is the bread that you took a picture of. And is it the same one that you actually brought in on Sunday, or is it a different
No, it was the one I made the week before.
Okay. So it didn't go stale. Now I have to ask, was this made in a Panasonic bread maker?
It was indeed. We've had it for hundreds and hundreds of years. The previous one didn't last very long at all, but this one, I think, will go on for eternity.
Yeah, we've got one too. My biggest problem is remembering to use it. But yeah, brilliant. Thank you, John. So we have a number of questions from me and other people that have sent them in. And if we get any in the chat, then they'll put those to you as well, as long as they're sensible, I guess. I don't know. We'll see. So anything can happen. But the first question that I have to put to you, and I guess, so we'll follow the question. I think I already said this in it, but we try and keep the questions sort of in the order of how the service goes, so that people can sort of follow on and we kind of have some sort of continuity. It doesn't always work out that way, but that's what I'm trying to do this evening. So thinking from the beginning of the Sunday service, and you were talking about the Lord's Prayer and our daily bread. I'm thinking about prayer, different things. Well, yeah, you pulled out a lot for us. And one of the first things that came up in that was talking about holy and hallowed. And so I want to put this question to you. How do we explain hallowed or holy in today's culture in words that sort of non-churchy people might understand?
I found it difficult, and I thought my holy was a bit of a cop-out, really. But the nearest I can think of is a bizarre holiday experience, really. We went to Sequoia National Park, and you're up 8,000 feet then, which is a bit of a trek up from the Central Valley of California. But the spaces in the woods of the sequoia trees, which had lots of rocks, and they were thought to be like thin spaces by the Indians and the native tribes, really. And I sense that kind of awe that some places give you. Even there, just looking down to the valley well, you couldn't see the valley because you were 5,000 feet above the clouds. And those sort of moments give you something where you can see your normal characteristic patterns of normality are just don't really take it all in. I think so. I do get those feelings from nature sometimes, and you can see there's a grandeur and a value, but to some extent a remoteness. Sometimes really, there's an element of remoteness, I think, from being hallowed. You're saying that you're not exactly the same. There is something grander than you, really, and give it proper credence.
That's great. No, thank you. That's helpful. That's because it is tricky, and you saying it like that, I think, is something as well that I think a lot of people might have experiences like that in different places. But I've climbed a mountain and felt that kind of thing there, and then being able to bring that language into holy, hallowed, and that kind of way of thinking about it, I think is really helpful. There's another one that I was sort of thinking about recently that was about not so much when we think about God, but perhaps when we think about holy and how it's talked about in the Old Testament concept, and this kind of idea that, well, when you come into someone's living room, like sometimes living rooms have like rules, right, where you have to take your shoes off, or at the dining table there are rules that you follow to kind of, I don't know, to demark that as, well, there's something special about what we're doing here, but actually also something very ordinary, and trying to bring that into it. But obviously that doesn't, that's a different kind of holy than I think what we're talking about with this. But I feel like it's another way of kind of getting people to understand, actually sometimes we choose to make things special, and that's the other half of holy. But yeah, super. And leading on then, next question, because this popped up on a couple of the slides as well, and I thought it was quite interesting. So you gave a bit of a description of those, which I don't have written down here, but you can share. But what do we mean by Christian counterculture?
I mean, the example I started off with was Jesus' baptism, where in effect Jesus is subservient to John at that moment, a period of time, and I've said in a service before that we more or less have got to be sure that this is right. The Bible has got it right, because that would be really odd to explain to people. The examples of leadership that the Jesus' contemporaries would have experienced were pretty dire, and in fact, the reason why Pilate was the direct ruler of Judea was because one of Herod's sons was so awful that even the emperor had to fire him and get somebody else, really. So there are so many examples from those times where kingship was just a diabolical thing. We come onto that later, but the idea that anyone who was in authority would allow somebody else at that particular moment to have authority over them would be something which was very, very strange. So that's in a sense why I would talk about Jesus' humility for a leader as being something which was outside the norm and would be very striking. I mean, allied to that, I like the example in John where two of John the Baptist's disciples, one of which is Andrew, see Jesus, and John the Baptist points it out that he's Jesus, and they go to him and talk to him and follow him, and they spend time with him, and then the next day they decide that they will switch allegiance from John the Baptist to Jesus. And it says there's obviously something remarkable about Jesus' character and being so different, if you like. But no doubt what he said was deeply meaningful. That, in a sense, that was something which was evident then, and as we got to the Gospel times, and the words of Jesus were written down and put together in an order. the emphases that were coming through, because I put the benediction, the Beatitudes in with the
Yeah,
old with the New Testament, just because actually there's a commonality of structure about going to God first and then going to people. What came out of those were the emphases of forgiveness, mercy, and humility that were definitely, even now, it's possible to say, countercultural to the leadership in what we see, not just in our land, but across ponds in different directions.
Very subtle, John. But yeah, so because I thought about this as well, and I thought there's an element, isn't there, where being countercultural has kind of become, I don't know, where some people are taking, well, Christianity was countercultural, so in its early form, and so the job of Christianity is to be countercultural, even when culturally there are good things.
Sure.
that then, you know, that then certain types of Christians are then deciding to be like, well, we don't want that, because our job is to be countercultural, rather than actually thinking about what it is that Jesus.
You're right. I mean, it's hard to pick a label and say it's valid for all times, really. I mean, in the history of the Roman Empire, you had the Christians produced almost like a welfare state of support, a high degree of taking it, of being meek, very effective and merciful. And in a sense, where the Roman Empire went pear-shaped was when it became the state religion, because it was commanded by, Constantine just said, well, God is on my side, my army will win, and that's kind of, then if you like, the old Christian church would become countercultural against that then.
So yeah, it's an interesting to think about. But what you pulled out of the mercy and the humility, and I still well, yeah, like you said, countercultural still, unfortunately. So also, because I should have brought more of your slides. I've only got one slide, and I should have pulled more of them in for us to share this evening. But one of the slides, and I noticed, because we talked through the modern version of the Lord's Prayer, which replaces trespassing with sins. I see that there's a comment. There's a stand-up comedian who does a stand-up show about the Lord's Prayer, and there's a whole section on, was trespassing a big problem in first century Israel? It's one of those things that's changed our language. But I noticed when we looked at the tables, with the language had switched to debts and debt basically. And I just wondered if you wanted to share anything about that.
Yeah. The element side of debt was in a sense of interpersonal behaviour, where you both know, in a sense, hopefully, that something has gone pear-shaped, and that one person, in a sense, is left in the debt of another person who has, like, the sinner, if you like, has perpetrated something which, if you like, leaves them, to some sense, at the mercy of the person they've wronged.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's it gives I think it gives the feeling that forgiveness is needed, and is essentially it's something which is hanging over you, hanging in that relationship, or more generally. After all, you can think you've done something wrong in your life, but that feeling isn't just restricted to that particular encounter. It's something which influences you for a long time, sometimes, depending on what it was, really. So that's the sense for the feeling of debts, really. But I don't have any strong feeling about one translation or another, really. It just seemed to be something which At the time when I read it, I didn't spend much time in the service on it at all.
No,
There's just so much in the Lord's Prayer,
yeah,
and perhaps it was too much to try and correlate it with the Beatitudes. But again, I've been struck by something which had previously been said at the local preachers' meeting the previous week, which we tend to compartmentalize too much. And I decided weeks ago that I wanted to go out of that. I wanted to find this trail from Jesus, the very start of Jesus' mission when he was baptized, through to the this combination of pivotal passages which are in Matthew 5 and 6, really.
yeah. Okay.
So I spread it a bit thinner than.
No, this stood out to me. I guess it goes back a bit to the what I said about holy and hallowed, in that I feel like debt is a more accessible language for a lot of people that they understand. And I also felt like it. I don't know, when we say the modern version of the Lord's Prayer, I think about that first sentence of being sin, and that kind of theological sense of sin, of being something that is harming my relationship with God. But then when you go to that next sentence and be like, well, when we've sinned against other people, it's hard to apply that same language, and it because it does mean something different. Whereas debts, actually, I liked that. I felt like it then made it work both ways. And do you think does it make it easier to understand the justice aspect in that?
I think it does, actually, yes. Sins can be literally all manner of things, depending on the circumstance. But yes, I do think that, because in a sense, as you're going down through in the Beatitudes, you get a hunger for righteousness, which is justice, and then the next one is mercy. You get a gradation there, which is, even though it's going from the God side to the person side, it's still a, yeah, in a sense, you're just trying to find a structure which helps you understand the greater whole, really, which can be a bit hard to grasp on one fell swoop.
Yeah, I think did we do the Lord's Prayer as a whole series one year? I think we did, didn't we? And we
yeah, that's right. Yes, in fact, I couldn't. I didn't want to find my old notes, but I certainly the one or two examples that did actually come back to mind from that service, really. Only about what sentence. I definitely didn't have bread that time.
No. Well, I'll bring it back to bread. And this was from Megan. So Megan, I might see if I can get her on. That might prove tricky, but so Megan helped sort of mastermind the theme of bread. And this is one of the things that she was not reading. It was on the Bible Project podcast. I'll pop a link in someone to that. But the Bible Project podcast on the Lord's Prayer talks about an alternative translation to "Give us today our daily bread" could be "Give us today the bread for today," and asking for just what we need, and it being only what we need. And so the really difficult question then is how might we resist the temptation of excess in today's culture?
Yeah, I didn't get very far in getting into this, because there's a fairly long Greek word which begins with P, which is used in this to describe this kind of bread, todayness of bread.
Yeah,
which is just about the only use of this word that is known.
Oh, right. Okay.
So it's quite difficult, but in a sense, you get some clumsy translations, like "let's have today's bread today," but and every day, really. But what I was trying to get over is, in a sense, what Megan is saying there, that it's as in the guy standing on the street corner saying, "Gives a job for the day." It was asking for enough, and but then every day we can have enough, because obviously there'd be periods of time for those that didn't have their own land, like like Joseph wouldn't have had his own land. He would have been reliant for his living on jobs which are given to him on a short space of time, like I feel like any self-employed person these days, but probably perhaps a greater risk than there wasn't any blanket underneath you. I think in those circumstances. So that would be a message which would the listeners would get and understand very graphically, really. Resisting excess, well, that's a challenge, isn't it? I can't claim to be devoid of the odd bit of excess. I'm afraid it's not proud of it, but it happens really. But I think as we say what we're doing to our world, we have got some very sharp reminders of what actions of choice can create great damage. Really, I know that was a word that was used last week for something else, but an invasion of choice. But I think that is excess. That is something in the large. If you imagine war is one of the greatest ways to mess up the planet, and the carbon dioxide balance from the burning which is created, and from the destruction of things which have got inbuilt carbon, really, which have been trashed.
Yeah,
I think how the resistance, I think, possibly has to come to the sense of meekness and humility.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, and we still have the thing that popped into my head as I was reading this question is that as you go, if anyone still does shopping in a supermarket, because I occasionally do, and you're now at the point where you're walking past towers of Easter eggs as tall as me, and so you can kind of, I don't know, it's that time of year, especially as we're in Lent, and Easter is kind of, for I guess the rest of society is happening around us. It can be easy to be depressed by that, but we do still have agency in that we can choose sustainable options, right? We can still. It's not to say you can't have good things. You can have good things that are good, right? Does that make sense? I don't know whether it's a
sure it is. Yeah,
Easter egg, something, a B Corp or something. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, tricky. But on the sustainability question, it does lead us on to this next question, which I thought I feel like it requires this as well. Can I put that in there? There we go. Because I tried to follow this. As an aside, I didn't get to do chemistry at school. I really wanted to, but fun story, at my school they had so few children they thought would manage to do triple science that the year that I did my GCSEs they decided just to not do it. I was upset. Anyway, but we had some chemistry on Sunday, which was this, and I feel like I want to sum up the takeaway as, could we say that from a climate science perspective, bread is a good thing? Is that a fair takeaway, or not really? Or is there more to it than that?
No, not really. But it doesn't have to be bread. It can be rice. It can be anything. The level of detail that I was dealing with, it could be any carbohydrate food, which is produced, because in a sense it is sustainable as you want for daily bread. Really, it doesn't have this precipice of creating an imbalance. The only thing which spoils it really is how the processing of how you go from one to the other. That's where you can, if you like, you can mess up this Genesis picture of sunlight and water and air and then you're producing because of your beautiful leaf, which has got photosynthetic properties. You're creating not just the the structure, the carbohydrates, but also the oxygen which is emitted for the rest of us to breathe, and gives you the backstory too. Yes, your father-in-law picked up that, and after the service, and said, "That's all we need to do is we just stick to bread." Well, it's not that bad, really, but it's what can mess things up is if you like the destruction of long-term soil stability in particular by trying to force too much too quickly, and also to destroy other areas of biodiversity, because you just want a cheap crop that you can make money from. The balance of that is dangerous now, just because there's so many of us around, really. But yes, bread's a good thing. Yeah.
I feel like I should qualify this as well, because otherwise I've just asked a preacher a random, like, a science question. And for those that don't know you so well, John, would you, maybe it's worth explaining. So you obviously you have a chemistry background, but also you head up the Eco Church activities in the circuit and district. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah. So yes, I was a sort of bona fide chemist until 2020, really. Although I'd formally retired 10 years before that, I took 10 years of pleasure to do research and actually write 2 books. And one of the books is on the sustainability of the elements. So I spent 3 years faffing about trying to make sense of that, really. But in that journey, there was one diagram which really struck me, which is where this all came from, particularly, and that was actually just the measurement of carbon dioxide and the ratio of oxygen to nitrogen over years. And this particular graph was actually on a pier in California, on the Scripps Institute. So the photosynthesis there was actually from the sea rather than from forests, but it was there. And if you look at it, there's this sharp seasonal change where it's not exactly the same every year, but essentially you've got, in the sunny times you're creating more oxygen, in the less sunny times you're using it up and burning more, as you might expect. And that was fine, but in fact what was going was that the baseline was going like that for the oxygen. The oxygen's going down, and of course the CO2 was going up with a counterbalance. That struck me as quite dramatic, and that in a sense made me think about, like, the goodness of sustainable living from a food point of view. Have I lost you? Or have you lost me? Hello? Oh, crumbs.
There we go. I'm so sorry. There you go. I don't know if you could see the comments, John, but
No.
that was all very strange. I think someone tripped over an internet cable somewhere. So
Okay.
I don't know if anyone is still with us or watching. But thank you, Nick, for trying to communicate with us. Hopefully, we're still going. I think we'll keep going and assume that we are. And if we're not, then it doesn't matter if no one sees it. Dearie me. So let me find the question. What was the last thing you said, John? From my
I have no idea.
Okay.
I'm sure it wasn't worth it.
Oh well, so I mean, 36 episodes before it's gone as bad as this. I feel like that's not too, that's not bad. We've done all right. I should have had some practice on what we do when it all goes to pot. But hey, so thank you, John, for sharing your story with us on that. I have another question, if that's possible. And you mentioned it briefly in previously about rulers and sort of, what people thought about them at the time of Jesus and Beatitudes. And then you did use some alternative language for kingdom, which I might invite you to sort of discuss a bit more on. But is there a good alternative to kingdom language, do you think?
It's really hard, isn't it? Because almost if you're modelling it on some system of government, I don't think one would talk about a president at present as a substitute for a king, really. So it's partly, if you like, how father comes up, really. In the ideal family, if you like, then the father or mother figure is something which can work. And the version that, as I said, that I mentioned, I did actually use in those years ago of what a kingdom would be like when we had sort of similar themes. And this was the idea of a benign leader, perfectly benign leader, close to God. And the idea was that perhaps that this is a John Dominic Crossan idea, a model of where thinking of things like one of the patriarchs, Abraham, moving across land on a journey. And in the journey, you'd have to take your close family, your extended family, your other workers in the community, the animals that you have, and you'd have to look after. You don't just march across there 30 miles an hour. There'll be times where you stop and then spend time and go forward. So you have to have a care for that land that you're in, which is like an immense task to do this in a proper way. But in the sense that, if you like, that divinely inspired leader is something that you might think of as a community which is not trying to do, is trying very much not to do damage, is trying to look after the entire community and trying to look after the world in which that community is sustaining itself. That means something to me. I think I can take that. I'm not convinced that it's going to have cachet to get right across all of humanity. However, there are dangers which are coming from this use of king's language at present. That wings which coming back across the pond, from the pond really, of Christian emphasis, I would say are expropriating the language for not for loving purposes. And that's a challenge to us, really, because what we say may well be misinterpreted by others.
Yeah, I feel that a lot at the moment, actually. The most recent Christianity magazine has an article which I haven't read much of, I must, but on the rise of Christian nationalism, and I'm I'm very, as a father of two Christian boys, I'm quite trepidatious about the danger that that movement poses to them.
Yeah.
And that's quite concerning, I guess. It's interesting. There's an element of the Davidic kingdom when Jesus is talking about the kingdom isn't there, and this kind of this there is inherent nationalism built into that as well.
Yes.
That is hard to escape when you're looking at, inescapable through an Old Testament lens. And then, obviously the danger is that gets applied. Well, if we try and apply that to our historical kingdom, again, that's not a good thing. Or I don't think it is. But perhaps bringing it back to what you were saying about counterculture, of it then flies in the face of everything that Jesus is trying to do to reframe what kingdom means. And, Jesus needing to say before every parable, this is what the kingdom is like, or perhaps this is how we should describe the kingdom, and that kind of thing. Got nothing helpful to add on that. I don't know if you do.
Sorry. Yes.
No.
No. It's. Sometimes it's worth just airing the fact there are problems, really, and just keep them a bit further up the stack.
Yeah. Well, finally, I'll ask you the big question, which I realise I should have been putting at the end of all of these sessions, because I feel like it's the best place for that to go. Is there anything you feel like you didn't get a chance to fit in that you would have liked to on Sunday?
I think the one that I missed out really was the relationship between mercy and justice. Really, in the Beatitudes, righteousness, hungering after righteousness, which points towards justice, and then mercy comes one after that. That they are. Imagine there needing to be forgiveness for something, then it's much easier for forgiveness to be affected if justice has prevailed and mercy has been shown. So there's a triangle, I think, between those three, really. They can work together, or they can destroy each other because of the absence of one of the other, really. So I think that was that probably would have been even far too long. I think we would have gone on more than just 5 minutes over the hour, I think, for that one. But I should have done a little bit more about that, I think.
You saying that, it reminds me of a service that you led somewhere a while back, and you talked about Northern Ireland. And for me, that's something I'll always remember of, sort of, it can be easy to talk about forgiveness and mercy in a very trite way.
Yes.
But then when you look at that in the context of what's happened in Northern Ireland, suddenly it's not a trite thing. It can be a much more serious and difficult and hugely important thing. I don't. Did you want to share any more on?
I think that went back to a conference I went to, a theological conference, bizarrely. I said I'm the only. They were talking about systematic theologians, and I said I'm probably the only systematic chemist here. But one of the first talk was of a minister whose church was on the peace line, and that was very, very powerful. But then there was a talk later on between two people in the sort of Zambia and Zimbabwe area, who were in different tribes, and in a sense, what transpired at the end, so the discussion was, in fact, one was of the tribe which had been oppressing the other tribe, and that was just one of the most profound silences I think I've ever experienced, really, where where the chair really had no idea how to take this discussion forward, and they did discuss things afterwards. But it was really where the sharpness came in. Really, it was a profound moment. You don't get many like that, really.
No.
But both people were open about it, and nobody was running around with an axe. So that was good. In fact, the chair of the panel on what is it now? It was the sort of marriage, the sort of human sexuality report in Methodism.
Oh yeah.
The chair of that actually was at that meeting, and he was brilliant and managed to produce some calming words that would allow the meeting to go forward. Really, it was a class act. Really, very proud of past Methodist presidents who can manage to do that. Really, yeah.
Well, thank you, John,
You're
for
welcome.
that. Hopefully, for those that aren't with us, or have had to leave because we just died for whatever reason, I'll try and edit the middle,
Yeah, sure.
edit it back together to make sense. But hopefully, we won't have that again. Thank you for those that stuck with us. Thank you again, John, for answering these questions and for your message to us on Sunday and for leading more bread-based worship. I guess I'll end like we always do with the prayer. I feel like today the Lord's Prayer is appropriate, even. So let's do that. I should say I'd use the modern version, but anywho, Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come. Your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us today our daily bread, and forgive us our sins as we forgive those who sin against us. Save us from the time of trial, and lead us not into temptation. For yours is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
Amen.
I feel like I got it wrong. I blanked for a moment there. Anyway,
we all do that.
I'll watch it back and see. Hopefully someone in the comments will be like, it should have been this. But anyway, I say the modern version. But it's that weird thing, isn't it? It's always on the screen now.
Yes.
And so I think, well, yeah, now I think about it, I tend to not say it out loud myself unless it's in church.
Yeah.
I don't know. Someone once told me that instead, I always try to try and use it as a framework for prayer and sort of find ways to cover off everything else in it in your own prayer. And so I think that's what I tend to do more often. Anyway, there's me waffling at the end, which Megan always turns off for. Tells me off for. Well, thank you again, everyone. Thank you, John. I'll be back next week, maybe with Sue, maybe with someone else, maybe not at all. This is a testament to how poor my organizational skills are, that no one knows when it's coming. But thank you and goodbye.
Okay, bye.